There are moments when a nation looks unbreakable from the outside, its monuments towering, its institutions centuries old, its ideals carved into collective memory. Yet inside, beneath the surface, something far less stable trembles. Today, France stands in that liminal space. A country that helped define modern democracy now finds itself wrestling with a crisis few imagined. A crisis not of borders or military might, but of legitimacy itself. We see a republic with global influence and a celebrated culture, yet shaken by recurring protests, fierce debates over identity, and a growing sense that the Fifth Republic's moral center is fraying. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: national strength doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes quietly, through trust weakened, promises unkept, and a shared mindset that slowly stops feeling shared at all. Welcome to Nations and Notions. Today we explore France, not the tourist postcard, but the deeper currents shaping a nation at a crossroads. We trace the arc of a society that once believed it embodied universal values, yet now struggles to reconcile those ideals with its own divisions. And we ask what happens when a country built on grand principles begins to doubt its own story. As we begin this journey, we're not looking for easy explanations. France's struggle is not just political, it's psychological, cultural, and historical. It touches everything a nation's power ultimately rests on: societal cohesion, institutional integrity, and the quiet moral contract between a state and its people. And as we move through the story, we discover that France's real challenge is not whether it can govern, but whether it can persuade its citizens to believe again. We start in the late 1950s, at the birth of the Fifth Republic. It was forged out of crisis, born during the turmoil of the Algerian War, and molded by a towering figure, Charles de Gaulle. His vision was clear: France had to be strong, centralized, and capable of decisive action. For decades, this model worked. It projected stability, authority, and a sense that the Republic could weather any storm. Yet his psychological imprint of this era also left a paradox. A political system designed for strength became one that struggles to absorb the pressures of a fragmented, pluralistic society. As we move through French history, we see a pattern emerge. Each major upheaval, the 1968 student revolts, the periodic strikes that followed, the waves of unrest in the banlieues, the yellow vests, the pension reform protests, the riots of 2023, reveal the same tension. Citizens demand to be heard, yet the system often responds with a paternal firmness that only deepens the divide. This is not simply about policy, it's about legitimacy, the belief that institutions reflect the people they serve. We walk through the streets of Paris, Lyon, Marseille, or Nantes, and we sense a nation layered with contradictions. France is both fiercely proud and deeply anxious. It celebrates universal equality, yet grapples with racial and economic inequalities. It champions secularism, yet struggles with the realities of religious pluralism. It boasts strong institutions, yet witnesses recurring scenes of street confrontation that suggest a widening moral and psychological distance between state and society. In these tensions, we see the complexity of a country trying to reconcile its identity with the world it now inhabits. One of the most powerful psychological forces shaping France today is the debate over laïcité, its distinctive model of secularism. At its core, laïcité was meant to free public life from religious domination, to create a neutral space where citizens could meet as equals. But over time, this principle has become a lightning rod in cultural and political battles. Instead of unifying the nation, it increasingly exposes fractures in how different groups imagine French identity. For some, laïcité protects the Republic's universal values. For others, It has become a tool wielded to police cultural expression, especially among Muslim communities. The conflict here is not merely legal, it's emotional, moral, and deeply tied to the nation's collective mindset. As we explore these debates, we notice something subtle but significant. Many of France's fiercest political disputes are not about economics or geopolitics, but about meaning. Who belongs? What does it mean to be French? Whose values define the Republic? These questions affect the country's national strength more profoundly than budget deficits or military deployments, because they strike at the foundation of societal cohesion. Without a shared narrative, even the most impressive institutions begin to feel hollow. This is why protests in France often carry a psychological intensity that feels uniquely French. Demonstration is not just a political act, it's a form of storytelling, a way of declaring we are still part of the national script and we refuse to be written out. But when protests become constant, when anger becomes cyclical, when police and citizens see each other with growing suspicion, the collective mindset shifts, the social fabric stretches thinner, and the government's ability to maintain legitimacy becomes less about force and more about moral credibility. We travel further into France's present, and a surprising truth emerges. The nation is not lacking in material strength. Its economy is among the world's largest. Its military is capable. Its culture globally influential. Its diplomacy respected. The challenge lies elsewhere, in a kind of psychological exhaustion. After decades of reforms, debates, and internal struggles, many citizens feel unheard, unseen, or left behind. Trust in institutions decline. Cynicism rises. This erosion is quiet but profound, because legitimacy, unlike power, cannot simply be enforced, it must be earned. Yet we also witness a different side of France, one that complicates the narrative of decline. Despite polarization, there remains a deep reservoir of civic engagement. Citizens debate passionately, organize collectively, and hold leaders accountable in ways many democracies envy. France may be divided, but it is not apathetic. That energy, that willingness to confront the state, reveals a society that has not surrendered its belief in moral choices or ethical government, and that in itself is a form of resilience. We look at the French youth and notice generational shifts that will shape the future republic. Younger generations are more diverse, more connected to global conversations, more critical of institutional blind spots, and more open to redefining what French identity can mean. But they are also less patient with systems that feel rigid or outdated. If the Fifth Republic was designed for stability, the emerging France demands adaptability, inclusion, and a sense that institutions are capable of evolving. The question is whether the political structure can meet this moment. As we follow this thread, we uncover a deeper historical pattern. France has reinvented itself many times, through revolution, war, occupation, and social transformation. Each reinvention came after a period of moral reckoning, when the nation confronted uncomfortable truths about its institutions or identity. Today feels like another one of those turning points. The unrest we see is not simply chaos. It is a sign that citizens are pushing the republic toward its next evolution. The struggle for legitimacy is, paradoxically, a sign that people still believe France can rise from crisis. When we examine the political psychology of this moment, we find a dual crisis. One part is institutional, about how decisions are made, who holds power, and how accountable the political elite appears. The other part is narrative, about whether the nation's founding ideals feel relevant to the lived realities of its people. The Fifth Republic was built on strong executive leadership, but in an age of heightened polarization and fragmented identities, the old model strains under new expectations. Citizens want participation, not paternalism. They want representation that mirrors the country's diversity.
They want institutions that find legitimacy not through authority, but through trust. We think of the Yellow Vest movement, which began as a protest about fuel taxes, but soon revealed something much deeper, a clash between two psychological worlds. One world felt unheard by urban elites, left behind by globalization, and alienated from a political system that seemed distant and technocratic. The other saw the need for environmental reform, modernization, and fiscal responsibility. But beneath the policy disputes was a question that haunts many democracies today. Who is the nation really for? Whose experiences shape its priorities? And whose pain is visible or invisible to those in power? As we move through recent years, we see how these emotional undercurrents continue to shape France's political landscape. They influence elections, spark debates over immigration, fuel fears about cultural identity, and complicate the country's approach to security and integration. They create fertile ground for political extremes, both left and right, to frame themselves as defenders of a people betrayed by the establishment. And in this atmosphere, legitimacy becomes a battlefield. But France is not a story of decline. It is the story of a nation in profound transition, confronting the gap between its ideals and its reality. And in that confrontation lies the possibility of renewal. If we look closely, we find signs of resilience everywhere. In the civic organizations, rebuilding community ties. In the intellectual debates, reimagining secularism for a pluralistic era. In the social movements, demanding transparency and justice. In countless efforts to bridge divides that once felt impossible. The real question facing France is not whether it can survive this moment, but what kind of nation it will choose to become. Will it cling to an older model of power that prioritizes stability over inclusion? Or will it embrace a new form of legitimacy, grounded in shared values, collective mindset, and trust, rebuilt from the ground up? A country does not recover from crisis by ignoring its fractures. It recovers by acknowledging them, learning from them, and choosing moral courage over complacency. As we step back, we realize that France's struggle is not uniquely French. It reflects a broader challenge echoing across democracies worldwide. A crisis of confidence in institutions, a fragmentation of identity, and a rising demand for ethical governance in an era of uncertainty. France simply manifests it with a particular intensity, shaped by its history, its ideals, and its unshakable belief that a nation must stand for something greater than itself. And so we end with the questions that matter most. What truly holds a nation together? Is it laws, borders, or institutions? Or is it something more fragile? Trust, moral responsibility, a shared belief that we are part of the same story. How do societies rise from moments of fracture, not by force, but by rebuilding legitimacy from within? And perhaps most importantly, in a world where national strength is increasingly measured not by power, but by cohesion, will France find a way to turn its unrest into renewal? In the end, the fate of the Fifth Republic may not depend on its constitution, its presidency, or its political factions. It may depend on whether the French people, in all their diversity, can rediscover a common horizon, one that honors both the universal ideals of the Republic and the lived experiences of a changing nation. The struggle for legitimacy is, at its heart, a struggle for belonging. And France stands today at the threshold of deciding what belonging will mean for the generations to come.